the dream, the savings, and the extra years I worked. My son Michael told me his dream when he was in his second year of medical school. We were sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, which is where all the important conversations in our family have always happened, and he said, "Mama, one day I want to open my own clinic. Not a hospital, a clinic in our neighborhood for the people who cannot afford what they need." He said it with the specific seriousness of a young person who has just understood what they are for, and I listened to it with the specific recognition of a mother who has been waiting to hear that sound in her child's voice. My name is Gloria. I am 71 years old. I worked as a senior administrator in local government for 34 years. It was not glamorous work, and it was not highly paid work, but it was consistent, and I was careful with what it produced, in the way that people are careful when they understand from experience that careful is the only way through. When Michael told me about the clinic, I was 58 years old and I had planned to retire at 60. I retired at 63 instead. I worked 5 extra years for the clinic. I want you to understand what 5 years means at that point in life. 5 years of getting up every morning for work when your body is beginning to have opinions about that. 5 years of not taking the trips I had planned. 5 years of continued careful spending when I had imagined I would finally begin spending a little less carefully. I did not do it with resentment. I did it because Michael's dream was the kind of dream that deserved to be real, and I had the capacity to help make it real, and that felt like an honor rather than a sacrifice. The investment was $520,000. I transferred it into tranches, documented through a formal equity agreement that my attorney prepared and that both Michael and I signed. In exchange for the investment, I held 70% equity in the clinic entity. Michael held 30%, reduced to that figure because he was only able to contribute $200,000 from his own savings at the time of the agreement. The equity split was not punitive, it was mathematical. We both understood it. We both signed it. Grandma always said, "Put love in writing." Not because you do not trust the person, but because paper outlasts intentions, and intentions, however sincere, are subject to revision when circumstances change. Michael had been married to Diane for 4 years when the clinic opened. She was organized and capable and had strong opinions about how things should be done, which are not faults in themselves. She took the role of office manager when the clinic launched, which made practical sense given her administrative background and her stake in the success of the enterprise. I had no objection to this. I had no objection to most things Diane did in the early period because I was a 70% shareholder operating at a respectful distance, and because Michael was happy, and because the clinic was open and seeing patients, which was what the 5 years had been for. And then, on a Wednesday in April, I called Michael to ask how the grand opening celebration had gone. He hesitated in a way that told me, before he said a word, that the answer was going to require careful management. The opening that happened without me and the story being told. Michael said the opening had gone well. He said it quickly and with the forward momentum of someone who wants to move past a topic. I asked him to tell me about it. He said it had been a small gathering, just close friends and colleagues, that it had all come together quite last minute, and he had not wanted to trouble me with the drive. I live 40 minutes from the clinic. I have made that drive many times for less significant reasons. I asked why I had not been invited. He said Diane had managed the guest list and that it had been kept deliberately small. He said he was sorry I had missed it. He said this with the particular careful quality of a man who is caught between 2 women, who both have claims on his loyalty, and has chosen, in this instance, to absorb the discomfort rather than address its source. I called Diane directly the following day. I want to be accurate about what she said because the accuracy matters. She said, "Oh, Gloria, that was actually last week. It was really just for family and the people who actually supported us through the process." She said it in the light, explanatory tone of someone clarifying a minor administrative matter. She said the words "the people who actually supported us" with a specific emphasis that was not accidental. She was telling me something. She wanted me to understand the position she had assigned me. Grandma always said, when someone uses the word "actually" in that particular way, they are not clarifying a fact. They are asserting a fiction and daring you to challenge it. I said I see and thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat with what she had said and what it implied. If I was not among the people who had actually supported them, then someone else was being credited with what I had done. That is a specific kind of claim. It requires a specific kind of investigation. My attorney's paralegal ran a search of the publicly accessible records the clinic had filed with the state business registry. The equity structure was correctly recorded. Gloria Daimi, 70%. The clinic's website, however, featured a page titled Our Story that described the founding of the practice in warm, specific detail. It described Michael's vision and Diane's organizational genius and the support of their community. It named specific donors and well-wishers. It described the journey of bringing the clinic to life. My name appeared nowhere on the page. Not as investor, not as equity holder, not as the person who had worked 5 extra years and contributed $520,000. I was not mentioned. I was not in the narrative. I had been written out of the story of a thing I owned 70% of. I read the page twice. Then I called my attorney and told her I needed to review the shareholder agreement carefully, specifically the governance provisions, and that I would be coming in Thursday morning, the agreement, and what 70% actually means. My attorney is a woman named Patricia who has handled my legal affairs for 22 years and who, when I arrived Thursday morning with the printed website page and the signed equity agreement, read both documents with the focused attention of someone assembling a complete picture before she speaks. When she looked up, she was very direct, which is why I have kept her for 22 years. She said, "Gloria, you are the majority shareholder of this entity. Under the shareholder agreement you have signed. Majority governance rights include approval authority over key personnel decisions, including the appointment and removal of administrative staff." She said the agreement was clear and had been correctly drafted, and that the 70% position gave me operational authority that had simply not been exercised. She said, "You can remove her from the office manager position today if you choose to, legally and cleanly." Grandma always said, knowing your rights and exercising your rights are two different things. One is information. The other is a decision. Take the time to know before you decide. But once you decide completely. I took the weekend. I did not act in anger and I did not act quickly, because anger produces satisfying decisions in the moment and regrettable ones in reflection, and I wanted no regrets attached to what I was about to do. I reviewed the financials that Patricia had requested from the clinic's accountant, to which I was entitled as majority shareholder. The clinic was performing adequately. The patient volume was growing. The accounts were in order. Michael was a good doctor and the practice was sound. The problem was not the clinic. The problem was a specific and deliberate erasure of my contribution to it, sustained over time, told to people who attended an opening I was not invited to, written into a public narrative on a website, and delivered to me directly in a phone call by a woman who said the words actually supported us with full knowledge of what she was implying. I drove to the clinic on a Tuesday morning. I arrived at 9:15, which is after opening and before the morning rush of appointments. I walked in. Diane was at the reception desk. She looked up. I could see the assessment happen behind her eyes. The recalibration that occurs when someone who has been managed from a distance arrives in person unexpectedly. I said good morning. I asked her to call Patricia's office because Patricia would be joining us by phone in 10 minutes to walk through some administrative matters. Diane asked what administrative matters. I told her it would be clearer once Patricia was on the line. I sat down in the waiting area. I looked at the Our Story page framed on the wall. I waited. Patricia joined by phone at 9:27. She walked Diane through the shareholder agreement provisions, the majority governance rights, and the specific clause covering administrative personnel decisions. Then she said, effective today, Diane's role as office manager is concluded by direction of the majority shareholder. Patricia said it in the tone she uses for all legal information, completely pleasant, completely clear. Michael's choice and the ultimatum that answered itself. Diane called Michael before Patricia had finished the call. I could tell because his name appeared on her phone screen and she held it up, briefly with an expression that was performing outrage while actually conducting a rapid assessment of her options. She left the reception desk to take the call. I remained in the waiting area. The morning receptionist, a young woman named Kezia who had been watching the proceedings with the careful neutral expression of someone who is very good at her job, asked if I would like a cup of tea. I said yes, thank you, that would be very kind. Michael arrived at 10. He came through the door with the specific energy of someone who has been driving fast and thinking faster. He looked at me. He looked at the space where Diane had been. He looked back at me. He said, Mama, what have you done? Grandma always said, the moment someone asks what you have done rather than why you did it, they have already decided the answer to the second question is less important than managing the first. Note that it tells you something. I told him what I had done and why, in that order, calmly and completely. I told him about the phone call with Diane. I told him about the website. I told him about 5 years of extra work and $520,000 not appearing on a single page of the narrative of a thing that could not exist without them. I told him that I had not acted in anger and that the decision was legal and documented and was the direct exercise of rights he had agreed to in writing. He said Diane had worked hard for the clinic. I said I did not dispute that. I said the question was not whether Diane had worked hard, but whether the story being told about the clinic was true, and whether I was willing to remain a 70% shareholder in an entity that was publicly misrepresenting who had built it. I told him I had installed a temporary manager through Patricia's professional network, and that the clinic would continue operating without interruption. He said he could not let me do this to his wife. I said I understood that loyalty and that I respected it. I said that the choice he was facing was not one I had created. I said, Michael, you need to decide what matters most to you here. The clinic, which is 70% mine and which requires my continued cooperation to operate, or defending a decision your wife made that erased me from the story of something I built for you. I said it without anger. I said it as a statement of fact. He chose his wife. He looked at me and said he was standing with Diane and that he hoped I could understand that. I told him I understood it completely. Then I called Patricia and told her to begin the process of selling my 70% equity position. The sale, the competitor, and the year that followed. Patricia identified 3 potential buyers within 2 weeks. The strongest offer came from a regional healthcare group that had been looking to expand into the neighborhood for some time and that recognized in the clinic's patient base and established location. Exactly the foundation they needed. The offer for my 70% was fair, reflecting both the current performance of the practice and the strategic value of the position. I accepted it. The sale completed in 41 days. Under the shareholder agreement, Michael had right of first refusal on any equity sale, which Patricia had correctly included in the original documentation. He could have bought my position at the offered price. He did not have the capital to do so, and the financing he approached to banks about was declined at the amounts required. His 30% remained. My 70% transferred to the healthcare group. The healthcare group had their own management structure, their own administrative systems, and their own vision for how the clinic should operate. Michael's 30% gave him a voice. It did not give him control. Grandma always said, when you choose to walk away from something, walk away completely. A departure is the worst of both positions. It keeps you in the pain without the freedom. The clinic did not close immediately. I want to be accurate about the timeline because accuracy matters more than drama. The healthcare group operated it for 7 months before determining that the integration with their existing network was not producing the returns they had projected, and that the practice would be absorbed into a larger facility rather than operated as a standalone clinic. The standalone clinic, which Michael had dreamed of at a kitchen table 20 years ago, closed in the 14th month after the sale. Michael and Diane separated 8 months after the clinic closed. I know this not because I was told directly, but because my granddaughter mentioned it in a phone call about something else. In the way that family information travels through the people who are connected to everyone, I did not pursue the information. I noted it and moved on. Diane called me once during the separation period. The call had the specific quality of conversations that begin with one purpose and arrive at another. She began by saying she had been thinking about everything and that she wanted me to know she regretted how things had gone. She said it quickly, as if the words were difficult to produce and she wanted them out before she reconsidered. I thanked her for saying it. I told her I wished her well. I meant both things. I did not offer anything beyond that. Some bridges are not rebuilt. They are simply no longer crossed. That is a different thing from burning them, and I think the distinction matters. What the 5 years were actually for and where I am now. I have thought often about the question of what the 5 years were for, because it is a question that the story's outcome seems to complicate. The clinic closed. The investment was recovered through the sale, but the dream did not survive. Michael and I speak occasionally, carefully, in the way of people who love each other and have hurt each other, and are not yet certain of the path back to something easier. The 5 years seem, from certain angles, to have produced a result that was not the one intended. But I do not think that framing is correct. The 5 years were not for the clinic. The 5 years were the expression of a love that was real and a belief in a person that was genuine. The money was real, the sacrifice was real, the belief was real. None of that became false when other things became complicated. The love did not expire because it was not acknowledged. It simply existed and continued to exist, independent of what anyone chose to do with it. I am not responsible for what other people do with the love I give them. I am only responsible for the giving. Grandma always said, you cannot control what a person does with what you offer them. You can only control the quality of the offering. Make it good, give it honestly, and then release it, because the grip will hurt you more than the loss. I am 71 years old. I retired properly after the sale, which had produced a return that, combined with my pension and the careful management of Edward's savings, means I am comfortable, in a way that I am grateful for without being extravagant about. I have time now in a way I did not for many years. I read, I garden. I have a Thursday afternoon group that walks in the park and debates things with the vigorous imprecision of people who enjoy the debate more than the resolution. I am, in the specific and unhurried sense, well. Michael called me on my birthday in November. He called in the morning before I had spoken to anyone else, which told me the call was deliberate rather than a day of reminder notification. He said, "Happy birthday," and that he had been thinking about me. We talked for 20 minutes. It was careful and warm and not yet easy, but it was real. And real at 20 minutes is worth more than easy at 2 hours. He said, near the end of the call, that he was sorry he had not handled things differently. He did not specify which things. I did not ask him to. An apology that gestures at the whole of something is sometimes the right level of precision, because naming every component can collapse under its own weight. I accepted what he offered. I told him I loved him. He said he loved me. We said goodbye. That was enough. It was not everything, but it was enough, and enough, honestly received, is one of the most underrated conditions available to a human being. Grandma always said, the ending you hoped for and the ending you get are rarely the same ending, but inside the ending you get, if you look carefully, there is almost always something worth keeping. Look carefully. Keep it, build from it. That is not consolation. This is just how lives actually work. Thank you for watching. If this story found you today, I hope it gave you something useful. Document your investments, financial and emotional. Know what your agreements say. And when someone erases your contribution from a story you helped write, remember, paper is more durable than narrative, and the records always exist even when the story does not include them. Leave a comment if this reached you. Share it with anyone who has given everything and been thanked with nothing. And take care of yourselves. You deserve to be in your own story. Make sure you stay there.